Greetings and hello, I am Kaiser coming to you today from a new location with my flag in the background. I think this will serve as a better background than what we've had so far, and I'm really hoping you all like my flag. I'm still trying to get us an official flag designed, but, you know, I'm doing my best here with my mildly limited budget. But hey, I got the flag, so that's good. And for those of you who don't know, before I start this video, I am planning on going to Philadelphia. I'm going to Philadelphia this upcoming September to see Pope Francis at his official papal mass and his visit to Philadelphia. I'm going to see the Pope. And you're probably wondering why I'm doing this if I've had such harsh words about the Pope. Well, I have this pen pal of mine who I've discussed my views with about Pope Francis extensively. And speaking of flags, I have matching cufflinks. But you see, I've been thinking extensively about... Oh, yes, a quick shout-out with these cufflinks. I would like to thank imperialist Mickey Bell of New York fame, who bought me these cufflinks as a very generous gift. Thank you very much. I'm touched. These are great gifts. I was going to probably buy them myself at some point, and I'm very flattered that you would buy them for me. I value your friendship very much. Thank you. Now, on the subject of, the papal visit again, I plan to go, and I'm going to take this flag with me. If anything about that changes, I'll let you know. I would like for you all to come bring your own flags of, Christendom's most noteworthy powers and such not. No fascism, no fascist groups, so no Franco Spain, no Phalange, no Vichy France, none of that garbage, and not even the Austrian Vaterland Front, not even that. Just stick with, historic powers of Christendom, just stick with that. Whatever your actual opinion may be. If you bring one of those flags, don't be surprised if I don't let you stand with us. Just don't be surprised, or at least if I'm an ass to you. Now, getting onto the topic of this video, this is a review of the movie Day of the Siege, 1683 subtexted. The film was made by a Polish-Italian coalition of directors, and that's really important to understand some of the problems with this movie. Basically, it's a film with a great concept, a great idea, a great setting, that is hampered by a low budget and the personal prejudices and opinions of the Europeans who made it. I consider myself blessed to be an American because I was not brought up in or surrounded by an environment where I viewed these neighboring countries inherently as my enemies or as my competitors. I think every monarchist and every Catholic needs to some degree, be grateful for that fact if they live in America or in a country where they are detached from the affairs of Europe, and therefore they don't have to get their historical views bogged down in present-day politics and understandings. And that's really what happens with this movie. I think that's something Europe really has to get out of if they're ever going to get better, if any attempts at a pan-European unity are going to work, even if Christendom is going to function again without coming to the same problems it had before. Now, to really discuss the movie at length, the plot basically is centered around Marco d'Aviano, who I mistakenly told my priest did not exist. I had confused him with... I assumed he was some caricature for the audience to throw themselves on and just kind of follow around in like a second-person view, so they could have someone personal to be attached to and involved with in the movie. And I had him confused with a caricature of, based on someone like St. John Capistrano. I had assumed because he has a statue, I guess, I got mixed up, I think, because he has a statue in Vienna, in the city of Vienna, a very beautiful statue commemorating him as this crusader monk. And I think he was at the Siege of Buda, or Breda, I was not, or Budapest perhaps. And he was not present at the Battle of Vienna. It had nothing to do with it, I don't think. But his statue is in Vienna, near the Cathedral of St. Joseph, if I'm correct. Which, sadly to say, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But Marco d'Aviano is... The film is set a few years before the events of the Siege of Vienna. which took place in 1684 or 1683, sometime in the 1680s. And sorry if I'm floating the details. I watched the movie several hours ago. My priest came. We had gumbo. He blessed my apartment, my new residence, and essentially I went and taught a class about this flag, and I got distracted. But you know, if you fact check me, thank you, because I may fault a few things because I also watched the movie. And I meant to give my opinions, but the class got moved up, and I had to hurry up and get my stuff together, and I had to pick someone up who needed a ride. So, you know, college stuff. Now, to talk more about, you know, the plot again. Marco d'Aviano is this well-meaning Capuchin friar who is basically catapulted to fame because he's known for his miracles. Straight away, I noticed problems with the film. Not that a Capuchin friar could become famous as a healer, mind you, but perhaps, particularly in the beginning of the movie, he's in some church somewhere in Venice, and he basically starts preaching to these people about how he's not a holy man. God uses him as an instrument. Okay, fine. You know, that's normal for a monk to do. Is, you know, especially a Capuchin, is to, you know, dump the credit off of them. I totally get that. What I don't get is his reaction to when a crippled man takes off a piece of his robe. Basically, the logic behind this man is that the pieces of cloth will heal him. If you're familiar with the Bible, you will know the story of Jesus and the beggar woman, the blind woman, who feels her way, or she's very ill somehow. She feels her way through the crowd, touches his robe, and because she touched the robe and had enough faith to think she would if she touched the robe, she would be healed, she'd have to get his attention, then she thought she would be healed, and because of her faith, she was healed. So that's what really, and even in the Bible, in the Acts of the Apostles, it talks about, you know, people trying to touch the apostles' robes and, you know, get pieces of their clothing or handkerchiefs or something of their person. And the apostles don't really frown on this. They just recognize it as something the people are doing to make themselves feel better. But Marco, Blessed Marco, literally takes, you know, he takes offense to this. And this guy is a cripple. He's moving around on a ancient precursor to the wheelchair. He's on a little slab with wheels on the side. And he reaches out desperately for this piece of robe. And when he does, Marco calls him a wretch and says, calls him a superstitious idolater. I mean, this is Pope Francis level of sneering at people's acts of simple piety and devotion. The apostles didn't do this stuff. They knew people weren't smart. You know, they weren't smart enough to know that it probably wasn't the best idea to just take someone's clothes. But they recognized that this was an act of faith. These people believed that God was working through this man, these people, enough that if they just got a piece of that holiness, it would help them somehow. You know, the apostles didn't sneer at that. They understood the faith of the common man. You know, they didn't look down their noses at it. You know, and certainly the early church fathers didn't, and most saints didn't. But hey, Marco's a blessed, and they never refer to him. Well, I guess they wouldn't refer to him as such, but even like the subtext that they show up in the movies, that shows up in these historical fiction movies sometimes, which really annoys me, by the way, because film is a visual medium. You know, you shouldn't have to tell people stuff in exposition dumps using historical terms that these people weren't even using yet. I mean, at one point, Marco refers to the 30 Years' War as the 30 Years' War. They weren't calling it that then. These were terms that were made up by historians to classify the time periods for easy understanding. I mean, that's not what they called the conflict between, you know, the Holy Roman Empire and its various vassal states and competitors, you know, and Spain as well. They didn't call it that. I think they called it the Great War or something. I don't know what they called it back then, but I know it wasn't that. Just like the 80 Years' War wasn't called the 80 Years' War, and just like, you know, the 100 Years' War wasn't called the 100 Years' War. It wasn't one war. It was just a bunch of wars fought over generally the same thing. And, you know, you don't need to do that in these movies. Film is a visual medium. You shouldn't have to do this stuff. Just show us. Don't tell. Show. I mean, any other movie could get this. Why is it with historical movies you feel we have to bore our audience with text? I mean, you know, for instance, there was a, for instance, how does the movie set up that Europe is in dire straits at this point in history, in this particular movie? Well, text. Okay, how do other, and exposition dumps, how do other movies show you? Well, there's this one very much older Polish movie, which I watched with my priest, just snippets of that I got from YouTube. It's Catholic Europe, it's Catholic Poland saves Europe from Islam. And, you know, whatever movie that is. Somebody edited that video, by the way, and I don't appreciate it, because you took out the really cool scene where the colonel has a fencing match with a janissary, and the part where the janissaries try to storm the battlements before that. That was a really good scene. I missed that scene. I mean, in this movie, they show how Europe is in dire straits, or this snippet of clips, they show Europe is in dire straits with text, but also they show you the Ottomans are sacking towns, people are dying, people are getting slaughtered, women are being raped, there's hanged corpses in these burned out villages everywhere. You know, there's no question that Europe and Poland is in a bad spot. It's right there. And then you see people flocking to churches solemnly and praying desperately before icons. That's how you show someone, whoa, this is pretty screwed up. Bad things are happening. I don't need exposition and text dump. Just tell me what's going on. The only time you should tell an audience like that about what your movie is about is, in my opinion, the text you see on like the back of a DVD box set. That's the only time you should tell someone what your movie is about. I should be able to pop it in, watch it, and understand what's going on. Back to the basic plot. Marco d'Aviano, as a character, he's perfect. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, considering he's a blessed. They could make him superficially religious and, worse yet, racist toward the Turks, but they specifically go out of their way to show that he was not. And something of an apocryphal event, I think, because I did a quick Google search of Marco d'Aviano and I found a very short snippet about his life, and I couldn't find anything on Catholic Encyclopedia or any source like that. And basically he saves a local Turk whose name is Abul from an angry mob of Venetians who want to kill him because he's a Turk. Now, I understand that racial tensions are a problem in Europe, and this is all obviously a political jab at far-right movements who are anti-immigration and totally anti-foreigner. For example, Marco points out that Abul has lived in Venice longer than some of these young men have been alive. So, you know, it's totally understandable that, you know, Marco would think this is bull. And honestly, I think most Venetians probably would too, especially if they knew he lived there, like, forever. I mean, I totally get that they would, you know, try to, you know, they might get distressed at some new guy running around Venice and think he's a spy. But if this guy has lived there his whole life, why are you trying to form a lynch mob to kill him? Especially when he's married to a European woman. Clearly, if whoever this lady, it's not really specified if she has parents or not, but if this mute and deaf European woman, well, I think she's deaf, not mute. If this deaf and dumb European woman, her parents let her marry this Turk, I mean, he must not be, you know, aloha snack barring, you know, insurgent. I mean, he had to get on these people's good side enough at some point, and it's kind of made out at some point that she's actually still a Catholic. She didn't become Muslim to marry this man, and Abul didn't make her become Muslim in order to marry him, quite paradoxically. Makes you wonder how their marriage worked exactly. Was there an imam that did it, or was it like an officiated marriage? Was it common law? Did they elope? It's never really explained. But regardless, I think it was kind of a ham-fisted moment in the film, and it didn't really need to be there. While at the same time I understand why it was there, and I don't disagree with the message there. It's just one of those things that I feel like didn't need to be there. There's this great tendency to look back at history and apply historical parallels where they don't really work. Sometimes they just work better than, you know, a time when they wouldn't, but honestly, history only gives us a preface to understand why events are the way they are now. History does not repeat. History sometimes rhymes, and it leads into, it's the beginning of the start of more events. It's not so much just a repeating cycle. It's just more of an explanation of, like, say, okay, you bought groceries yesterday you have groceries in your pantry because you bought groceries yesterday and put them in the pantry. I mean, that's pretty much how history works. I mean, ignoring the fact you have to go back and buy groceries like every week or so, but whatever. You get my point. So, Marco has a conversation with Abul, and at this point I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be one of these movies, isn't it? The fight with the Turks is going to be skewed to some really racist thing, and it's all going to turn into this big spiel about la-da-da-da-da, let's all get along, la-da-da-da-da, let's trot on and insult another period of Catholic history with our modern-day quasi-enlightenment bullshit. Well, no, actually. Marco has a sincere desire to convert Abul, as is mentioned in information I found about Marco d'Aviano. He joined the Capuchins with the express original intention of going to convert Muslims to Catholicism. So that lines up with his character pretty normally and pretty outstandingly. And there's actually something of an interesting conversation between these two, where they talk about, their religion and their faith and, politely and nicely in sort of a Francis de Sales kind of moment, or, a St. John Vianney kind of way. Marco tries to convince him of the virtues of the Christian faith and how it's the only way to save his soul without, insulting him or, making him feel bad. So, good on him. But as to whether or not the event is historical, I couldn't tell you. However, Abul sort of does something pretty nasty later, which we're not going to talk about just yet. Later in the film, the film kind of jumps around at this point between the main character, Kara Mustafa, the Islamic villain of the film, and, his personal problems, his life. There's a real attempt to give the character depth and to make him look like this interesting person, which I really liked, actually. Before you say, oh, he's kebab, who cares? I really like the fact they tried to give him this backstory, this character development, this, why, okay, so he's a zealous Turk, and he's totally 100% on board with the Ottoman Empire, but why? Why does he feel this way? What compels these people to feel this way? What makes them think this way? Is it just religion, or for him, is there something personal to it? Is he just someone who's using this military career as a way to further his own political gains in the Ottoman court? It's never really shown, so we don't really know. We do delve into him, just kind of being a zealot, and he kind of says the same thing over and over again, almost like a freaking, cartoon villain. I will capture the I will capture the golden apple, and I will conquer Vienna and Rome, for Islam. Well, that makes a nice, simple villain, yeah, and I mean, the movie never really tries to pretend to be deeper than that. It was disappointing. I mean, if you're going to try to give him this backstory and spend all this time on him, why would you basically just have him say the same thing over and over and over again? There's this subplot where, his wife is having dreams he's going to die at Vienna, and he goes to some mystic about it, but, it doesn't change his plan. He goes ahead anyway, with, his plan to, lead as the Pasha, lead the Ottomans to victory in Vienna. That doesn't change anything about him, so it seems to me like it was almost utterly pointless. And here we get to the real bull crap about, this whole story, which to me at least rings like bull, and didn't show up at all in Marco d'Aviano's, anything I read about Marco d'Aviano. So I think something this important would show up in his backstory. So, I'm gonna assume that it didn't happen, but either way, it doesn't really matter at all in the grand scheme of things. So, it's pointless regardless, at least in terms of the plot. Basically, when Kara Mustafa was young, he went to Venice, presumably on some kind of trade thing, or with his father as a diplomat to the Venetians, or whatever. And Marco was in the docks at the time, and some cargo fell loose from a crane and nearly killed Kara, but Marco pushes him out of the way, saves his life. They exchange these, wolf teeth medallions that they have for some unknown reason, and... Now, I was cooking also at the time, so maybe I missed the reason, but they exchange them and they're supposed to mean something, but they don't. I mean, the movie's misleading. You could be mistaken, you know, before the movie even finishes that it's, you know, some kind of quasi-ecumenical message and you just want to turn it off. You know, but it's not, so just sit through it if you really want to. And, I mean, honestly, though, as far as, like, well, we'll get to that later. So, moving on, eventually Marco has this vision after looking at a comet, the same comet that tells the Muslims that it's a ripe time to attack Vienna. Basically, he has this vision about somehow knowing that the Turks are going to attack Vienna, and basically he gets a vision and he decides to go visit Leopold, decides to go visit the Emperor Leopold and convince him to make an alliance with the Poles. Now, here's where things get really murky history-wise, and where I get a little offended as an Austrian fan. See, basically at this point, you know, Marco is going to see the Emperor and he meets him, and he's a real dainty. I mean, what? This is the same Leopold who rode into battle, you know, once or twice in his life, commanded in the field successfully, and fought a war against France for the future of Spain. And even at one point tried to strong-arm the Pope when he got close to accepting the French candidate over the actual Habsburg claimant to a Habsburg country. So, you know, he's not this dainty personality. He's a strong leader, you know. He was kind of Hamlet, at least according to Marco d'Alviano's biography, which for all I know may be biased in his favor. You know, writes of him as being indecisive, kind of Hamlet-esque in terms of he lets doubt and, you know, sadness consume him. But I can't find any historical basis for this in the personality of Leopold, either from contemporary accounts that I can access through the internet, you know, or from just reading about him in general. That wasn't the picture I got of him. You know, I pictured him as not really the strongest of the Habsburg emperors in terms of personality, but firm, you know, kind of like Ferdinand, except he wasn't going to just sit on his hands all the time. He had the patience to weather tough decisions and make them and lead his people on the right course. But the movie portrays him as a dainty, or maybe it's just the actor. Like, the actor looks great. Like, it looks like Emperor Leopold. Like, they did some good casting on that. But his personality is just awful. Like, he's a dainty little, you know, he's a dainty little chicken shit who gets bossed around by his sister at court once or twice. I mean, it's just so weird that they would portray him this way. Maybe these guys have access to contemporary records. I don't, but this just felt wrong. And this is where the Polish and Italian filmmaker coalition starts to come into things, in my opinion at least. I wasn't there. I'm not involved. I haven't looked into the controversies surrounding the movie, if any. But, I mean, there's no really, like, fantastically racist moments where there's a bunch of, like, or not racist, I should say, but, like, really, like, fantastically controversial, the modern man moment where there's a bunch of Austrians standing around and they're like cutting off Turks and going like, evil Turk, like butchering Turks, you know, and like laughing their asses off about it. There's no moment where that happens. So I don't really think it would garner even that much attention. Anyway, so throughout the movie, basically here's how the characterization works. Poles are all absolute badasses. Italians are all absolute saints, and the Italians are nearly all absolute saints, except for Marco's parents, whose father implies that he was very disappointed at his son's decision to become a friar. And the Austrians are wimps, except for the one Italian general who's leading this one contingent of Austrians at the battle, the siege, I mean, on the walls. And that's really insulting. I mean, let me put it this way to you. The Austrians held out at this siege with multiple breaches, undermanned and underarmed, and starving for a long time. I mean, the Turks, in typical fashion, were using sappers to, you know, dig tunnels and undermine walls, and the Austrians baffled their efforts, either disarming the mines or, you know, defending the breaches. They were really impressive at this siege. The Austrian discipline and, you know, leadership was at its peak. There was nothing really embarrassing about the defense, and even then, you know, the movie doesn't really show the defenses as being bad. You know, they defend a breach like one time, you know, once or twice, but it's the field battle that really upsets me. Oh my God, the field battle. Basically, the Austrians... Okay, so they set up this huge cavalry, this huge cavalry embankment with abasses and with you know, what would amount, you know, abasses and caltrops to stop horse archers from attacking their positions. Now, I did do a quick read up on the Battle of Vienna, and I did remember this part in the historical battle, and I definitely didn't see it in the text that I was able to scrounge up in the last hour or so after I got home. Essentially, these horse archers these look like Tartar horse archers, try to attack the Austrians from a defended position in a field full of caltrops, and it ends terribly for them. What happens instead is that they beat off these horse archers basically in the only time the Austrians in the field seem good at all. And by the way, minus points for all the uniforms being absolutely the same for the Austrians. Standardized uniforms were basically not a thing until a couple hundred years later, even for the Austrians. They had kind of the same equipment, but styles and, you know, individual, you know, what each person could afford was drastically different. You know, but I mean, I understand giving them something same so people can identify them in battles, but they literally look exactly the same. Like, it's almost like the same 20 actors played Austrian soldiers, and they just cloned them 50 times with CGI, like, or 500 times with CGI. And, like I said, that's really depressing. The older Polish movies that feature fighting the Turks are huge battles, like hundreds of extras running all over the place, fighting and dying and explosions and gunshots and fire and death and war, and it's just, oh, it's awesome. But here, they're just, it's a video game. Like, I could get a better fix for Austrians destroying Turks, you know, if I played frickin', Empire, and that's sad. Or, you know, hell, I could get a mod of, I'm sure there's a mod out there that adds the Austrians to, with Fire and Sword for Mount and Blade. I'm sure that in some mod somewhere the Austrians and the Turks can be found, and I could get like a bunch of freaking people to play with Fire and Sword on the off chance, you know, that, I don't know, Warband servers are down as are Napoleonics, and there's no mods on those. I could get them all go play that, and we could have this big awesome battle, you know, and we could, you know, remove Kebab all day long, and I could get a better fix. Hell, I could get a better fix playing as these Austrians in a Captain co-op map against, you know, the Turks, and it would still be better. Even with, you know, the AI sometimes being stupid, or just ridiculously overpowered, depending on what map you're on and what the rules are. It's just really disappointing. Now, back to the battle itself, these horse archers basically get repelled. And then the Ottoman heavy cavalry comes around on the unprotected flanks of the Austrians, and wait, you're wondering, the Austrians are very famous for their pikemen. Why don't they use those? Well, because this movie is stupid, and the Austrians are going to fight a cavalry force with literally not a spear among them. I'm serious, people. Late 1600s warfare, and there's not a single pike formation in this entire movie. More depressingly, there are arquebusiers with the tripods, but there's no pikes. What? Okay, basic common, even if like the Austrians could not give their men pikes, basic logic dictates that if you attack a siege camp the first thing the Ottomans of all people are going to do is send cavalry to counter you. And none of you are using pikes. Arrgh. And then to make matters worse, the Austrians run away and the infantry gets slaughtered completely. Oh, but wait. Just like the historical battle, there was an Austrian cavalry contingent that went with the Poles. What does the Austrian cavalry... Now, I want to remind you. It's implied that in the way the Turks advanced upon the Austrian infantry from the flanks, they were in a phalanx formation. And the Austrians were in a standard, square, rectangular, basic formation. The cavalry too. So, basically what you're telling me is cavalry's response to facing other cavalry was to run away and not counterattack. And I'm not saying this was an organized withdrawal, people. This is a rout. This is before the enemy even hits them. They are running and saying the battle is over. Ugh. Even contemporary historians acknowledge that the Austrian infantry performed well in the field alongside the Poles and were an instrumental piece of the left flank. In fact, if the Austrians had not been able to hold their own, it's highly possible that the Hussars would have been flanked and would have, if not lost the battle or failed the cavalry charge, would have taken massive casualties to the flank. But they just botched the Austrians. And again, this is where we come back to understanding, the problems with this film, which is being the Italian and Polish coalition of filmmakers. There probably were some Austrians involved at some point in the making of this movie, but the credits pretty much specifically mention, a Polish and Italian film cast. Maybe in the credits there was Austrians and I just didn't see it because the credits were kind of quick, But if that's the case, God, do you guys have no pride in your country? You let a movie be made where you were just absolute retards? Are you afraid that if you said a word, the Poles and the Italians would invade your country and annex it? I mean, what? This is just outrageous. I mean, the way the Austrians are just treated is just terrible. And honestly, I think I have an explanation for it. See, in Europe, history is basically yesterday's news. I mean, it's formed their politics, it's formed their way of life, it's formed their religious choices. It's a huge part of who they are. Because, especially since, in Europe especially, history was not a disciplinary field in scholarship. Let's hope it stays one for the sake of my major. It was just what happened. It was just something you were supposed to know. It formed your life. It formed your existence. It gave you meaning. It was your culture. So to know this stuff was all really important. There weren't any dedicated historians making sure people didn't forget, basic facts about their history. Says something about today, doesn't it? But just the fact that this Italian-Polish coalition would make this film and then totally crap all over the Austrians really says something about the state of Europe today, and really says something to all the people who think that just at the drop of a hat, Europe is going to go back to being Christendom and, fight the Islamic hordes. It's not going to happen, guys. I mean, it's going to take a lot more than that. But, essentially, that's all the politics you need to know. Basically, the Italians hate and the Polish hate the Germans because of recent history, and that muddies their view of the past, I guess. And as such, the Austrians in the movie are all weak and spineless and, basically only fight when their back is to a wall and they don't have any other choice except fighting or losing the city that is technically speaking their capital. So, those Austrians, it's just a discredit to Germanic military tradition, that whole movie. But the Poles are, of course, awesome. I mean, the winged hussars look great, but I gotta say, it's a shame we live in a world where movies like Waterloo exist and where movies like the third Lord of the Rings movie exist that have these great epic cavalry charges, but this movie exists. That's it. That this movie exists. I mean, or at least this part of the movie exists. The charge is pathetic and airy. I mean, the blood effects that they try to add in are just cheesy, digitized at best. There's no realism to them. I mean, the first time I saw a pole, you know, slash a Turk across the chest, I laughed because of just the cheesiness of the blood effect and the wound effect, and how light the slap was and what a gar and gash it left. Like, literally, it was a video game, and I was just like, oh my god, come on, you know. And then, of course, you know, the fact that it's basically the same 20 Hussars cloned, you know, 20 times, you know, to make this cavalry charge happen through a 90-degree flat surface. Yeah, apparently the land around the city of Vienna is a nearly treeless 90-degree flat plain, like a map in Rome Total War, with, you know, little furry patches of grass and nothing else. No hills, no trees, no nothing. And it just takes away from the whole experience to look at the same 10 Turkish tents, you know, light on fire in the same 10 ways, with the same 10 Poles killing the same 10 Turk in 10 different spots, and it's just cloned over and over again, and it just takes away from the entire experience. The only good battle in the whole movie is when the Turks break through a breach in the wall and the Austrians have to repel them. That is literally the only noteworthy battle scene in this entire film. And that is depressing. I mean, we're talking super depressing. For me, at least. Because, like, again, if you want good battles, if you want to see what a movie can be when you have extras and you cut the digital crap as much as possible, Google the movie Waterloo. The full thing is on YouTube. Bless whatever history professor uploaded that to his class, and other classes could watch it. Go watch that movie now. Drop what you're doing. If you have 10 hours to spare, sit down, watch this movie, and learn how it's done. This is how you do battles. This is how you do fights. This is how you make a historical fiction movie based on war. That is the total, absolute right way to do it. They set the stage, they unleash the battles, and it's just glorious. No, of course, that movie was made in the 70s or the 70s, and this movie was made in 2008, so I guess it's a different film culture. But hey, you know, Lord of the Rings, the first ones at least, had a limited budget, and they have some of the best battles in cinema in recent history in terms of like a medieval setting. So, I mean, hey, no excuses in my mind either. So, and remember, Lord of the Rings was a low-budget movie. They had an infinitely smaller budget than what The Hobbit made. Can you imagine if, like, Peter Jackson had just walked in one day and said, fuck green screen. We are making this movie the way the fans want it. Like, can you imagine, like, a built lake town? Can you imagine, like, the Battle of Five Armies with actual soldiers and everything? Can you imagine that? That would have been awesome. But, no, we had to go and, you know, go nuts with CGI and pull a George Lucas. But, you know, enough about my opinions about the Hobbit movie. But that's my point. The CGI really hampers this movie. And look, guys, if you couldn't do a movie about the Siege of Vienna and make it look good, why did you make it? I'm not complaining we got a movie about it. Yeah, we got a movie about it. That's great. And it's available on Netflix. But at the same time, you just... I don't know how to explain it. Just, if you can't do a scene and make it look good, either don't show it or find a workaround. Rewrite. Do something. Like, I mean, it's just really disappointing to see otherwise good movies make themselves look silly by doing something that is clearly out of their depth. I mean, it's like asking a 10th grader to... It's like asking, you know, like asking an 8th grader to write a high school thesis, you know, and with citations and everything and make it look right and all this stuff. Like, that's just out of their depth. Or, you know, asking a kid who is mildly interested, in rockets to the point he buys those little model rockets from, like Hobby Lobby and shoots them in the air every once in a while, to build a rocket that's capable of breaking the sound barrier going to space, it's just too much, and ultimately it's going to fall flat. It's going to fall flat on his face. So why would you do that? Just work with your limitations, find a way to work around it, and use some freaking creativity. Now, got that little rant out of the way. Getting back to kind of the more structure of the film and other things. Oh, I forgot. Remember how I said all the Poles and Italians are perfect, pretty much? Yeah. That goes for, of course, the main character of, the Polish side, Jan Sobieski, the guy every Polish history nerd went to this movie to see. In fact, I'm certain some of you fast-forwarded until you saw those beautiful winged hussars in the movie. It's just, Jan Sobieski's perfect. The actor, in my opinion, is perfect. He's spot on, he captures the character, he sounds right, he looks right. In my opinion, he's perfect. But that's the problem. The man is perfect. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying Jan Sobieski wasn't awesome, but he has no internal conflict, no character depth. Again, an older movie is a better choice. There's another movie about the Siege of Vienna and about Jan Sobieski, about himself, and I think that movie does it better. Displays his personal conflict, displays his fear, displays his piety, displays how much that plays into his decision to finally go, and do this at his old age. But in this movie, he's just perfection. He's just in awe of, I have to expect the guy to dismount from his horse and unleash Matrix-style kung fu on a bunch of Ottomans, and then super jump a la Hulk all the way to Istanbul, jump through the Blue Mosque in the middle of Friday prayer, and uppercut Suleiman's head off while singing Gaude Mater Polonia with a full complement of a Gregorian choir, and doves flying through rays of sunshine. That's how perfect they portray this guy, which could be good if they made him an interesting kind of perfect. But he's just a perfect kind of perfect. You never worry about this guy. You never care about this guy. He's just there to personify Polish military might. That's all he's meant to do. Which is cool, but at the same time disappointing. Because Jan Sobieski was a man. Like I tell people, if you want to demystify a historical figure, imagine them going to the bathroom. Then you just suddenly realize they're just like you. They're like you and me. They're human beings. They probably do some of the same stupid stuff we do. They probably say some of the same stupid stuff we do. They probably think the same stupid things we think about. We're probably all just like each other in private. I mean, it's that kind of thing. Jan Sobieski seems like he was literally born out of. It seems like he was literally sent down from heaven, like the Dannebrog in Denmark, to lead the Poles to historical, eternal glory. And it's just, I wish they would do more with him. Even more so, worse than that, is how the Austrians treat him in spite of this. The Austrians look down their nose at Sobieski as a peasant and as a commoner. First off, I don't think he was that low-born, but maybe he was to the Austrian, in comparison to the Austrian nobility. Whatever, fine. But implying that he was, like the Austrians are almost racist towards him, in terms of letting him be a field marshal for the Holy League at Vienna, who are you? Some little peasant, yeah. What do you know about warfare? About commanding troops in battle? Aha, what? First off, you're going to get an actor to play a character so perfect. Then you're going to get a bunch of these really snobby guys to basically say, in powdered wigs, to basically try and play him down. The audience doesn't buy this for a second. They don't doubt this character's abilities for a second. At what point the Pasha's trying to play down, he's trying to play down, Sobieski too. But in between that, there's these weird montages of like Sobieski putting on armor and sheathing his sword and being all awesome and stuff with radiant glowing light, and it's like it's build up. I understand that, and it's really awesome in one sense. But I looked back and I'm like, this is so tension killing. Like, so yeah, he's not old. He's not too old to do the job. He's like awesome. He's like Gandalf. No matter how old he gets, he's still a badass. So there's no question at all that he's the man for the job ever at any point in the mind of the audience or in the mind of myself. So, worse yet, Leopold basically says the battle's lost. Like, he basically downplays their ability to win. Like, I understand the Battle of Vienna was a pretty bad situation, but really? On top of making him a namby-pamby, you're going to make him a quitter? Come on! One of the key traits of the Habsburgs was their ability to weather any crisis and outlast their opponents. And you're going to portray the one Habsburg in this movie as a quitter? Come on! That's not fair. That's not fair to the Germans. That's not fair to the Austrians. That's not fair to history. It's not fair to the real people these guys were. And maybe, because I was trying to thaw gumbo, maybe I was away when they introduced the guy, but there's this one Austrian dude that's following around Leopold a lot, and he has like a burn on his face, and like he doesn't look particularly like somebody from history, but randomly at the War Council, they call him Eugenio of Savoy. And I'm like, wait a minute. Prince Eugene of Savoy? The Eugene of Savoy? Like, one of the 7 greatest generals in European history according to Napoleon? Like, the hero of the Austrians in the Ottoman Wars? The greatest field marshal in this War of the Spanish Succession, at least on the on the Imperial side, and he just shows up. Oh yeah, he's been here this whole time. I'm like, what? The Eugene of Savoy is in the same room as Jan Sobieski, and he's the only guy who believes in him. Like, he's literally just like, I trust in this man's capability to lead our forces to victory. And I'm like, this happens in this movie? Like, maybe it actually happened. But again, there's two people I know. Like, it's Eugene of Savoy and Jan Sobieski. I mean, and they probably may have been in the same room at one point. I just didn't know. I'm like that much Catholic military awesomeness was in the same room? Like, dude, but at the same time, he's literally the only guy who thinks Sobieski is right for the job? Hello? Sobieski has been fighting the Turks in Poland and Eastern Europe for almost his entire military career. He's instantly known as the Hetman of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth anywhere he goes. He's one of the greatest, rulers in Poland's history. He's regarded far and wide as one of the greatest cavalry commanders in Polish history, and was at the time regarded as one of the greats. He won several battles. He's a seasoned veteran. He's brilliant. And yet the only person who thinks he can do it is, accidentally enough, the only Italian in a room full of Austrians? I noticed that. I completely noticed that. I mean, you may be able to fool your audience into thinking that Eugene of Savoy is not Italian, but Savoy is in Italy. So, I know what you're doing there. You're making the only other main character or secondary character who's an Italian look better than all the Austrians in the room. I see what you're doing there. It was just so aggravating watching this. Because, why can't the Austrians and the Germans just be cool? Why do you have to let prejudices from recent history influence how you portray Austrians who would have never done something like the Nazis, would have never even dreamed of it in a million years? Why do you have to let that color your perception and allow you to inflame bias against them? That's not fair, and it's injurious to Christendom. And I doubt these filmmakers cared about that. Maybe they did, or maybe it was all just, joint Italian and Polish nationalism, which seems to be the consensus from this movie that I'm gathering. That's the vibe I got. I never got that this was, some super duper, Catholic production. Like, I did feel that at certain points, but I felt like that was more because it was a component of Italy and of Poland. Everything else in the movie seemed to lean towards that. I didn't feel like they were really stressing Catholicism over, like, Europe and its Catholicism over everything else. I really felt like they were downplaying it. And I was just really kind of disappointed. I mean, the movie is not bad, but it's not good either. It's just one of those things where it's like, well, you're not wasting an afternoon by watching it, but, I mean, honestly, you are if there's other things you could be doing. I mean, it was either a choice between this and Patton, and, I asked which one he'd seen, and he said Patton, and I like Patton, but I didn't want to watch it again. And again, the movie itself is 4 hours long or so. And we didn't have time to watch that before my class started, so basically, I put on Day of the Siege instead of Patton, just to save time. And again, I walked away really, really, really disappointed, because the movie had this potential to be great. It had this potential to be operatic. It had this potential to be dramatic. And at the ending, when they execute the Pasha for failure, there's this slow, dramatic scene where his son walks away after his father dies and casts away his father's amulet. And, there's a cross in the background, and, like, it's snowing, and the Pasha's own soldiers cheer his death. I mean, it came really close to being this dramatic thing. I was like, wow, that is, whoa. Like, it was just incredible that, this scene was in this movie. And at the end, like, talk about ending on a strong note, but, just because I swallowed a bunch of crap and then, had a fine meal afterwards, I still ate a bunch of crap. That doesn't take away that fact. It doesn't make the bad food you gave me before as good as the good food. It just highlights how bad everything else was, And especially, considering, again, what the movie could have been. I mean, the actors' performances are not bad. They do a good job. They do a decent job. The characteristic actor I want to talk about is Abul, which really, I don't understand where they were going with him. Like, I saw him as, like, the good Turk, the good Muslim archetype at the beginning, but I'm really not sure now. Because as time went on, basically, Abul, to give away a spoiler, Abul goes and joins the Turks. He abandons his wife, or wives. He apparently has 4, but the mutant deaf European lady is the only person we see. And essentially he leaves her to go fight with the Ottomans and to fight with the Turks. Why he does this, I don't know. Apparently he feels a stronger relationship with his religion than with his nationality as a Venetian. I find that makes sense. It's a good motivation. Maybe he's worried that he'll live in a world where he'll be harassed more by native Europeans, okay. But basically he goes off and full-on joins the Ottomans. Even tells Mustafa Pasha about Marco. And, like, he tells him about this mystic monk who's really, like, on the influential side of things. And to me, that made the fact that Marco was such an integral part of everything, like you don't understand. This guy is in front. He gives a big pre-battle speech. He stands on the hill ahead of the Polish cavalry. Oh, and by the way, this is going to be a real kicker to you. He's holding Saint Pope John Paul II's crucifix. Okay, we get it. The one Polish Pope was really cool, but I just find it really ironic and potentially very inappropriate that you're evoking the Pope who kissed a Quran in a movie where like over 300,000 Muslims died of Catholic soldiers. I mean, mixed messages much. I mean, it's not a knockoff. It is basically the staff. It is the cross with the with the really like low hanging Jesus on the bent cross, and it's like, you did this. You had to put this in there. Somebody in the prop department couldn't just give him a simple crucifix from the period, or something like that, or something ornate. You had to give him the St. Pope John Paul II crucifix, implying that the Pope, who was so tied in with the Cold War that he bought the bullcrap that all religions in the world would come together against atheistic communism, and in the aftermath we would live in a religious right utopia, you know, implying the guy who believed that enough to potentially defame the entirety of Catholic history in a struggle for survival against Islam in the East, you know, would kiss a Quran, and that's the pastoral staff you're gonna use for your main priest character? Oh, just why, man? Why? You could have picked anything to give this guy. You could have not given him anything. And you gave him that? This is why this was the moment I really thought this movie was just Poland, you know, committing self-fellatio. Like, wow. Okay, you're basically willing to jump time and space entirely, you know, for the sake of, you know, cheap self-referentialness. What, for a cheap self-reference? Wow. Okay, yeah. I mean, basically, here's the thing. I found a statue of Blessed Marco while I was reading about it, and he's holding a crucifix. He's holding a cross, a big staff, like a processional cross. And it looks nothing like the staff that he's holding in this movie. There's a statue of him. A statue. And you couldn't even be buggered to use the staff from that one? Like, you couldn't be buggered to copy that and evoke a very nice bronze statue? Okay. I mean, or metalwork statue? Like, wow, okay, let's evoke modern garbage, you know, let's not tie it into a, you know, really specific and really powerful, you know, like, historical item, you know, let's just, you know, proto-John Paul II, implying John Paul II was pro-crusade at all. I mean, he issues a blanket apology for the Crusades. He doesn't really apologize for the Crusades. He apologizes for the collateral damage of the Crusades, which ends up being taken by the world as apology for the Crusades, and has been used against Catholics over and over again. But at least with him, I could safely say he apologized for the collateral. You know, it's not as bad as, you know, Pope Francis, some of the things he said. But you basically still try to evoke him. Like, okay then, alright then, go ahead, you know, it's not like I can stop you at this point. This movie is like 4 years old by the time I'm watching it, or about 6 years old, no, yeah, about 5 years old since I watched it. Well, yeah, so whatever, how many years old? I'm not good at math, that's why I'm in a remedial math course. So, yay, I guess, whatever. Basically, the movie is really disappointing. It's, you know, it's insulting towards the Austrians. It's basically, the way I can describe it, it's a high schooler's Battle of Vienna, you know, with soft nationalism thrown in. It's bland. It's boring, and it's, you know, I don't see this movie making anyone else a fan of this battle or of this period. You know, I see it being used to put high schoolers to sleep on a day when there was a gap in the lesson plan for a history teacher. You know, I see this movie as just interesting people who are already interested in the period. And a further failure of it is, it's a movie that was made because they felt like it had to be made, not because they wanted to make it. This whole movie smells of insincerity and of garbage in the sense that, you know, it's this. It's a movie they're making for purely political and not artistic goals. Like, you can make a movie because you're inspired by your politics or your faith, but make it good. Hire people who will put some effort into it. You know, don't try to do something you know your budget can't handle. You know, just don't, you know, do it some credit, do it some justice, you know, don't hackney it, you know, don't, you know, the movie basically has no value. If it dropped off the face of the earth tomorrow, it would not be missed. But, I mean, if you're really desperate for your late 17th century war fix, and you really want to watch some kebabs get removed, you know, so desperately that you'll watch it in, like, really, really, really bad reenactor, you know, on a really, really bad reenactment with, you know, really cheap CGI effects put into it to make it look bigger than it actually was. I mean, go right ahead and watch it. You know, you got 2 hours to kill. You know, go watch this movie. But if you have better things to do, if you have, you know, any kind of game or mod that allows you to experience, you know, the Ottoman Habsburg Wars, you know, from the perspective of the Poles or the Austrians, or if you have, hell, if you want to go, for starters, go like Google on YouTube Poland, Catholic Poland saves Europe from Islam. Watch the old movie clips. I mean, you'll find a better film just watching that and all the related searches than you will. You'll kill 2 hours better on that theme doing that than you will with any amount of watching this movie. It's a bland, boring, disappointing movie that if you can afford to skip it, you know, skip it. But if you really want to check it out for yourself, watch it. In fact, my advice is, if you really must watch it, get like 4 or 5 of your friends, or, you know, however many of your, like a good group of your friends, get some snacks, get some drinks, you know, and make fun of the movie, you know, riff it, you know, riff Day of the Siege, you know, and just talk about its awfulness, you know, like, make fun of the historical inaccuracies, make fun of the bad CGI, make fun of all that stuff. But don't, for the love of God, don't buy it. Don't, you know, put money towards it. I mean, you know, by all means, you know, steal some video clips from it, you know, but, you know, if you want to make like a funny little tribute show, steal some screenshots that are like at least passable, but don't waste your time trying to make it more than it is. Look, guys, I know we're really starved for good cinema and good art and good music sometimes, but that doesn't mean we should lower our standards just so we can say we haven't. That doesn't mean we should start making really crappy movies because we feel like they should exist. It means we should raise our standards, you know, watch where we put our money in terms of film, and make our desires known to people who we think could do a good job. You know, and heck, it may be several years after the successful counter-revolution and the counter-reformation before we see films about Catholicism that are any good again. But, you know, if that is what it is, so be it. I would honestly rather never have a movie about the Siege of Vienna than have Day of the Siege. And honestly, I don't think the world would lose much. Well, that's about all I have to say about the film. If you want more of my thoughts, ask some questions in the comments. You know, if you want to know, if you got another movie you want me to review that's kind of Catholic and you want me to talk about it, put it down in the comments, pop me a message, and just let me know what you think. But that's about all the time I have. I have class in the morning, and I think I've made my point about this movie. In summary, if you're going to the end of the video to see what I think and you're just absolutely bored out of your mind with me ranting for an hour about this movie, you know, you're not missing anything. It's just a soft nationalist movie where Poland and Italy, you know, basically have a circle jerk all over Austria, you know, to make themselves look better at removing kebabs. You want to make fun of the historical inaccuracies and, you know, all that stuff, watch it with a couple of your friends. Otherwise, just pretend it doesn't exist and Google some clips from older movies and better movies about Polish hussars than this one. I'm the Kaiser. Have a good night, And of course the train starts right as I'm trying to do the outro. Ah, my life is just glorious.